Let's talk about the super neck. You know, I've been building cigar box guitars for about 10 years, and I've learned a lot and had a lot of fun and met up with a lot of great guys and gals. It's been a real enjoyable part of my woodworking career. And through that process, I've kind of learned a lot of things, and I've kind of experienced a lot of different ways of building stuff. And I've come up with some ideas and some products, and wanted to share one with you today. It's a new product that we've got. It's called the Super Neck. This video is going to be a little bit long, so you might want to grab a cup of coffee, sit back, relax, and hopefully give it a listen, and you'll see what we're up to. This is the Super Neck. First thing I want to do is kind of go back a little bit through history to talk about how I kind of got to this point in development of products. As you know, as I mentioned, I've been building guitars for about 10 years. And when I started off, I didn't know anything about guitars or how to build them, but I saw a cigar box guitar and I knew I had to do that. So I went through the early stages of trying to find out how you build one, and then I found the materials and I read more and got a few tools, and I sat down and I started from scratch and I built my own neck, and I put on a fretboard and I fretted it. I had to finish off the frets and do all that, and I got it done. Then I built the box, put it all together, and did that a couple of times and kind of liked it. But what I began to notice was I wasn't real crazy about building the necks. Now, I know a lot of you really enjoyed that part of the process. More power to you. But I wanted to find an easier way to kind of get to the actual building of the guitar. And what I found was I found a few people that actually made necks. And so for the next little while, I was buying necks from everybody, and I was putting together the boxes, and I was pretty happy with that process. And then as things moved on, I started using more necks, and then the next thing you know, I started this little company called MGB Guitars, and I went and I found sources and I got parts made. We currently sell on our website what I call are the through neck design. These are maple necks, rosewood, really nice necks. They have this tail on them. And as I've always told people, that this part kind of acts as a spine, and you're just hanging a box on it. And as long as kind of everything's connected to this, the bridge is down here connected, you've got a really solid instrument. This happens to be one of our 6 strings. We also sell it in 3 and 4 strings. It wasn't too long after that where we had those, I began to look at kind of making my own necks here in the shop on the CNC. And this is one that I built, a cherry neck, fired it up on the CNC, but I still had the time-consuming cut it on the CNC, but I had to sand it, had to finish it, and had to fret it, put a fretboard on. So it's still a lot of work. And I always wanted something that was a little bit easier. So again, I have limited time to build, and I really want to get to kind of putting it all together. One of the other things that I noticed when I started looking at necks, the first necks were literally 1.5 inches all the way down, because that's what the stock was that a lot of us have used, gone to Home Depot, Lowe's, or whatever. And to me, that kind of looked kind of spindly. And I always wanted kind of a design that had more of a gentle taper. I thought it was more organic and it would look pretty cool. So when I CNC'd mine, there was a gentle taper that came down through the neck. So I was doing these for a while for my own building, and pretty pleased with it. Well, then as one of the big things that changed, one of the things that happened was I had begun to see a real opportunity in the ukulele building side of the hobby. And so we went out and we got some kits for building ukuleles, and I know a lot of you are familiar with it because you bought these, and these are just a really good seller for us. We sell quite a few of these. And what I decided to do was, rather than just get all the parts and give them to you and let you put it together, was to get a finished neck. And that's what we have in our kit, a finished neck. We have all the other stuff, but it's a finished neck, all assembled, sanded, stained, painted, and ready to, or sealed and ready to go. And what we did to ease assembly is we put this hanger bolt in there. And that's not an original idea to me. That's been around for a while. I know a lot of people have done that. But I thought that really made sense. And this has worked out really well, because in talking to the builders, what I find is a lot of guys and gals really love this because it's basically bolt on and ready to go. Well, I've been working on trying to do the same thing for a guitar neck. And after a number of months and a number of samples and working with my suppliers and developing it, testing it, and getting it right, I've come up with what I call the super neck. Let's talk a little bit about it. The super neck is a maple neck with a rosewood fretboard. It also includes all of the frets, fret markers on the face and fret markers on the side, and then it's finished, sanded very nicely, and finished, and it's ready to go. This is a great product. I'm really, really proud of it. It's got a gentle taper, just to give you the dimensions. Up here at the nut, it's about 1 3/8. 1 3/8. So that's just a little bit narrower than most of the 1.5 inch wide necks. Coming down here to the 12th thread, it gets out to about 1 3/4. So it's a little bit wider, about 1/8 inch on each side, wider than 1/2 inch. But again, it has a really nice tapered look to it, and I'm really, really happy with that. I've built a few boxes with it already. This is one that I built early on. This was one of the big JFRs, and I wanted to try and build it into just an acoustic, and so I used a super neck on it. Worked out really, really well. Pretty pleased with that. Recently, I just finished another build, and this is actually a 5-string. I'd never done that, so I said I probably need to see how that all works out. So I built a 5-string using, again, the super neck, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. So again, you have these necks. They come with rosewood fretboards, and as you've known, if you've been around rosewood, there are just some unbelievable, beautiful pieces of wood, and there's a lot of variation. This one happens to be almost just solid black, just all dark. No, you can't really see any grain, there's no colors. But then other ones that I've had, that I've looked at, have some beautiful colors on them, some nice browns and different colors, just absolutely beautiful. So it's kind of a mixed bag, and you never really know what you're going to get until you open it up. But there's a lot of different colors and shapes, and as far as the grain, and they look really, really good. So again, that's the neck. This is what you get, ready to go. Again, maple, really nice, feels good. Oh, and by the way, this is radiused, great fretwork. Everyone I've looked at so far has been really nice and flat, and they're ready to go. So when you buy the neck, you also get a little bit of other things. You get a kind of a hardware pack full of some hardwares, and I'll tell you what's in that hardware pack. First off is the hanger bolt. This is how you're going to kind of put it together. Unlike the ukuleles, I don't install the hanger bolt in these necks. I'll leave it up to you, because the location of where you want to put that may vary upon what you're building and what type of box and how thick and where you have the room to put it in. So I'm providing you a hanger bolt. We throw in a couple of really nice washers, large size washers. We also throw in 2 nuts, kind of a standard nut and a locking nut. So you have all of those nuts. There's also a bone nut, pretty close, pretty ready to go. It doesn't have any string slots because you might do a 3 or 4 or a 5-string, so you'll need to do that. And then also in that kit, it comes with a shim. Let's talk a little bit about the shim. When I built this one, I knew that I was going to be putting this little piece of art underneath the bridge. So the bridge was going to be up about 100 thousandths, or roughly 1/8 of an inch. And so what I needed to do was also, to keep my geometry like I like it, I needed to move the neck up a little bit. So I have these shims, provide these shims, and basically I just glue the shim down here. Now, as standard, that fretboard is about 1/4 of an inch in the high spot, and then you've got the frets on top of that, so you will have plenty of clearance. Now, obviously, we sell a lot of the mini box buckers, our flat pickups, and it is a pretty close fit to get this on there, get the strings on there, and go over the top of these covers. Wouldn't hurt if you wanted to also use a shim to just jack it up a little bit. But if you use a shim here, you have to kind of keep in mind that you probably are going to need to do that on the bridge as well. You'll want to lift that up. Well, let's talk about a few more things about how you actually do this. So again, you get a neck, Again, it's not drilled. There's nothing here. What I do is when I get ready to drill it, I actually have a little drill guide that I made. I drilled this over on the drill press because I knew I could get it nice and square as far as the hole. And so I made this little block out of about 3/4 inch oak. And so what I have now is I have kind of a drill guide. What I use is I use a drill. I have my drill. I use about a 7/32 drill bit. A 1/4 inch is a little bit too big. It'll still work. When you see these hanger bolts, the screw portion of that is the equivalent of about a number 14 screw. So when I use a 1/4, it still takes a lot to get it in there, but it's not as tight as I like. But if you only have a 1/4 inch drill, go ahead and do it. Maybe put some glue on there, some epoxy to kind of seat it in place. But what I find is a 7/32 seems to work really well. And what I do is you'll notice on my drill, on the bit, what I've done is I put a little piece of blue tape that is at a location that corresponds to about the length of the threaded portion. That's about how far I want to go in. I've kind of checked it to make sure I'm not going to drill through the neck and have an ugly hole on top. It's not too long, so I'm good to go. So what I do, and I'll just do this real quickly, set my wood block up there. And I've got it down far as I can go with my wood block. I take my little drill fixture off, and I come back and I drill again down to my blue tape. And I've got my hole here, and I'm pretty pleased with it. It looks pretty good. Now, we have a hanger bolt here, and we've got to install this. And there's a couple ways you can do that. What you can do is I've given you 2 nuts in the kit, and you can put those on the bolt, the threaded side, and you can kind of jam them together with 2 wrenches and jam them up, and then use a wrench or a socket or some way to drive it. But I also have available on our website a hanger bolt driver. And that works really, really well, because what you can do is put it into your impact, or you can use a socket or however you want. But what it is, it's actually a driver. And what that allows you to do, very simply, and then you back it off. And now you've installed your hanger bolt into the neck, and it's ready to go. Now, occasionally on a few of them, like this one, I kind of noticed I got a little bit off on my angle. It's okay if you get off. I use sometimes a wood block and a little hammer, and I'll bend it down. You can actually kind of bend that and get it straightened up. You don't want it off too far at an angle, because then it would tend to pull the neck. So once we've got that done, and I'll use one here. Again, my technique, and I recommend this on the ukuleles, and I'm recommending it on use with the super necks. Now, if you're doing an acoustic and you have a sound hole in the center, it's perfect. On the front side, you can just mount the neck, put the nuts on there, and you're good to go. But on this one, and oh, by the way, these are really, really good boxes for this. One thing you'll find with a super neck is your boxes need to be a little bit longer. We got to be talking in the 10 or 11 inch. The shorter boxes that you were able to get with work with some other kind of neck may not work with this. So you'll need a little bit longer box. And again, I don't know if I mentioned, but this is 25.5 inch scale. So keep that in mind. So here's one. Again, box, one of the things I always do, I recommend this on the ukuleles, and I also recommend it on here, is to come in and reinforce it. And what you can see is I put a piece of 1/2 inch plywood in there to reinforce that front, to give me a little more meat to bolt to and to hang on to. So you really want to reinforce these boxes. And it's real simple then. Once you've got the bolt installed, mark a center line and mark the appropriate depth, and then it just simply slips into place. Come back on the inside, put the washers, put the nuts, and tighten it up. Now again, what I would tell you is you can glue these in place. Not a problem at all. You can glue them in place. But if you're going to do that, I'd suggest you kind of get pretty close to done and make sure everything is exactly like you want it, that everything lines up and it kind of works and looks good. And then you can come back, take the neck off, put some glue on both the fretboard, because that's a nice wood, and on the back of the neck itself, and then you can glue it in place. The neat thing is is when you clamp it down with the nuts, you're actually clamping that glue joint. The other thing to always be careful is always to look underneath here and make sure that our fretboards are sitting flat on the box. If it doesn't, you might need to take a file, come in and file out a hole. You might need to make a bigger drill hole here, but you want to get that to fit very, very flush, and you really want it to be nice. So this has really worked out well. It came up nice. I can see that when I glue it and clamp it together, it's going to be a nice fit. I had done that on this one, and you can see this was one of the first ones, and I got a really solid connection here, and I'm not worried about it. I mean, it's a solid connection where we've taken the neck and we've really secured it to the box, and so it's going to be a really solid connection. Now, as we move on, one of the other things we need to do is we need to think about the end with the headstock. Now, what I did was, on these headstocks, I shaped them to kind of a generic looking headstock. They're about the right size in my mind as far as scale. You might want to shape this a little bit, straighten it up, change it and stuff. Feel free to do whatever you want, but as it is, I think it's good to go. The neat thing about these necks is it's got the back angle, and that's really, really helpful in building this. So the next step is usually where we're going to go ahead and put our tuners on here. And what we have available for that is a tuner template. It's shaped like the neck, and it has a number of holes spaced. They're in about a 1/2 inch, which is what you want for most tuners, and then they're spaced accordingly. And it gives you lots of options. And so you can kind of look at that. Again, maybe put 2 on top, 2 on bottom, 1 on top, 2 on bottom. On my 5-string, I actually, as you can see, I actually went with 3 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Now, just a little note about spacing on this template. You can't use 2 right next to each other. It won't work. As a matter of fact, you need to skip 1, and when you skip 1 and you're apart by 2, what you have to do is that will only work with the mini tuners, because the standard tuners, the knobs are too big. If you want to use standard tuners on here, you need to have 2 holes in between. So it's put a mark and then go 3 down, put a mark, and that's where the other one is. And what you can see, what I typically do, I like to do, is just to make sure I'm doing it right. I put some blue tape on here. I used my template. I lined it up, took my marker, and I marked the location of the holes, and now I'm good to go. What I will do, just from experience, is I like to take an awl, and I like to go in, and I like to mark the holes with the awl. That gives a little bit of a lead for the drill on the drill press, so it doesn't tend to wander as much. So that's what we do to go ahead and mark for the tuners. So, okay, so once we've got that together, the next thing, we've got the tuners in place. Now we're talking about the nut. It comes with a nut. It's not installed. It's easy to install. You install it like most other nuts. Just take some super glue and glue it in place. One of the things I suggest also, and if you watch my video on installing nuts, there's a simple process that I'd like to go through. Put the nut on there to kind of position it. Then I have what I call is my half pencil. I think you may have seen, again, a video on this. It's simply a pencil that's been sanded in half. And what that allows you to do is that allows you to lay flat on top of your frets and then slide from one side to the other, go back and forth. And then what you've done is you've kind of marked where the frets would line up into that nut. And then that shows you how much space above there that you've got to have for one string spacing, and then you've got to cut your slots. So I kind of look at that, and this one's kind of close. I'm pretty happy with it. I know I've got to cut those slots in there, and it's going to work out really well. Well, one of the other things that, I get questions on this all the time, is what about spacing on the strings? And marking them on the nut. When you use a bridge, it's pretty much locked into position. That's how it's going to be. There is a lot of debate on how far to space the strings. You're not going to get the same answer if you ask 3 or 4 different guys. Everybody kind of has their own opinion. There are some guys that like to spread them out evenly. There's some guys that like to spread them to where the strings are real close to the edges. They like that. There's other people that I found that like to kind of stay with the spacing on a 6-string guitar because of their memory, muscle memory. They're just used to that kind of spacing up here on this end. Whatever you want to do, that's fine. Whatever makes you happy will work. And if you're building it for a guy or a gal, a musician, you kind of got to ask them. But one of the things we're adding to our product line is this little template. And this is a little template that gives you the guide for spacing for both 3-string and 4-string. And it's real easy. Once you have the nut installed, is you take this template. Now again, because this is radius, it's not going to lie flat on there, and it's a little bit wider than the 1 3/8. But if you can lay this up there and look at the little indentations and the little mark, it will tell you where to actually mark for those strings. And that's where you would file the slot for the string. So that's again a little helpful tool that we have in our tool section. You can find them. Okay, getting down to the end here, one of the last things is an item that we also sell. We also sell a template. These have been real popular with our ukulele line. We sell templates, kind of help you know the location of the bridge. It's really critical on a ukulele. You've got to get it pretty dead on. But we've also made one for these super necks. It's a template, fits around the neck slot, and then it has an opening down here, which is where you would position the bridge. Now, this is a hole that was designed and big enough for a 4-string, so there's a little play in there when you're using a 3-string. You just need to kind of get it in the center, line it up in the center. But that'll give you the right location. Here's one thing, really critical. Whether you get my templates or maybe somebody else's templates, whatever you do, don't take it as gospel. Always check and verify. So for example, I've used my template here. I put this little 3-string antique brass bridge, and I'm going to go up to the end where the nut will be, and I'm going to come down and measure, and I'm going to look, and it's dead on at 25.5 inches. That's very critical. You want the front of those saddles where the string is going to intersect that saddle right at 25.5 inches. It's been my experience and what I've seen from other guys and talked to professional luthiers. I just talked to some this week about it. Generally speaking, it's going to be 25.5, and you're going to lengthen the string a little bit. So most of these are right at 25, and I'm kind of thinking that when I get it put together and I do the intonation and put it all together, I'm going to have to pull those saddles back a little bit. But again, always check, whether it's this or a ukulele template, always check that distance and make sure you're right. You want to be at the scale length. Okay, one last thing. When I drill these out on the back, again, that allows me to get in there and to tighten up the bolt. And I think in videos on the ukuleles, I've talked about covering this up. You've all got pieces of wood laying on. I mean, you could take the top of a cigar box and put it on there, and it would be really cool. Just to kind of, if you want to, just to let you know, we currently sell round covers, 4 different materials. One of them is just regular old birch that's not finished. You can sand it, paint it, make it do whatever you want. We also sell them in 3 types of wood. We have a maple, we have cherry, and we have walnut. Now these are veneer on an MDF substrate, and it's real wood veneer, and then it's finished, has a nice spray finish, so it's really good to go. I always kind of like the cherry. They always kind of match up and look pretty nice, but we have these. One thing to keep in mind, usually, just so you know, when you get stuff from me, like these wood pieces, it's usually got mask on it. And so you might get it and you look at it and you're gonna say, man, that doesn't look like walnut. Well, yeah, underneath that mask is walnut. So whenever you get something from me, check for a mask. You just take your edge of your fingernail and peel it off. So again, those are the covers. They look pretty well. On this one, I put one on there. It's actually, again, the cherry, and I went ahead and put my logo on there and stuff, and that turned out pretty cool. So you can do that. So again, it's the Super Neck, ready to go. They're in stock. We've got a bunch of them. A number of guys have already been buying them. I'm getting some good report, some good feedback. We also, again, comes with a kit. We have available a template for marking the tuner holes. We have a template for finding the location of the bridge. And don't forget, also, we have this new little template for marking location of the string of the nut slots. And we also have this little handy tool. It's a hanger bolt driver. And no shop is complete without a hanger bolt driver. So again, thanks. Hope you like it. And again, I know there are guys and gals who absolutely love starting from scratch and making their own neck and carving it and cutting it and making it. God bless you, keep going. But if you're like me, and if you kind of like to see the end result and you maybe don't have a lot of time and you want to make a lot of them, keep in mind the Super Neck. It's reasonably priced, and literally you saw how quickly it is to put one together. This guitar took the neck out of the package, drilled a few holes, put the hanger bolt in, tightened it up, and we're ready to go. Now we just have to kind of finish all the other components, maybe finish the box, do some creativity, cut some sound holes, make it our own, and we're ready to go. So again, keep in mind the Super Neck. Stay tuned. Good to talk with you. Hope this was worth your time. Shoot me some comments. Got any questions? You guys know how to get a hold of me. Take care. Thanks.